Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. Folks who are here online, you are welcome to keep your video on throughout the service. We'll mostly keep audio off, but you will want to know where that unmute button is for the end of the service. And also online attendees, you can see the order of service by following the link in the chat. If you're here on the UUCPA campus, you can scan the QR code at the welcome table if you like to get the electronic order of service, or pick up a paper copy there. We do try to keep those short, so they just use up one piece of paper, front and back. So follow, go look online for more information than you'll see there on the printed order of service. We have a few announcements that are all about changes to the service, good changes. One is next week, December 4th, everybody who comes indoors needs to have proof of the bivalent vaccine, those who are eligible for that. As you've probably seen if you've been following public health news, being vaccinated, having earlier boosters and everything, if they've worn off, is not very useful. But the bivalent vaccine makes a big difference. So we want to make sure people are up to date if they're going to be inside for the safety of the most vulnerable folks here. Speaking of inside, we are having indoor services until announced otherwise. It's cold out there, really lovely in the sun, so do go on out there afterwards, but we're going to be indoors. And in any case, starting December 25th, we will have just one service. Every Sunday throughout the year at 10:15 is our one service. It'll be nice to all be in one space. Lots more details about the how and why and how to do that as well as possible about that on our website. And one more thing about services and other things going on, either around you or maybe you got it from an usher, there is a holiday activities brochure, services and other things going on in this season, starting with next week, there's a Brocelianda concert, and also next week we have decorating of this space is being carried out by the senior high youth group, but they're happy to welcome others along if you like Christmas decorating and you want to be a part of that. Reverend Kat is in charge, and she promises snacks as well. If you didn't get to pick up a holiday brochure like that, it's also available at the welcome table. And now, let us begin our service.
We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also, to be welcoming to whomever we meet, and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together. With our centering words each week, we draw on one of the many sources of our living tradition. Today's words are from the 19th century U.S. American poet Walt Whitman. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and the sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air. Every season of every year of your life, re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body. As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us become centered and fully present in this place together. Please rise in body or spirit, and we'll sing Come, Come, Wherever You Are, which is number 188 in your great hymnal.
I now invite you to turn your thoughts to the important events of your life, hear the important events of others' lives that they wish this community to share. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like me to speak any one of these mornings, you can always share it by writing to joyconcern@uucpa.org. It will get shared in the next service. Or when you arrive, fill out one of these cards. Of course, if you are online on Zoom, you can put it in the Zoom chat during this time, and I will have a look. As we're gathering our thoughts, I'd like to light a candle, especially for the people of Ukraine. Been 10 months, almost 10 months at war. The winter is cold and dark there, and colder and darker. with most of the power system out. So our prayers for peace and well-being are with them. So let's just take some quiet time of meditation and prayer to hold one another in our hearts, to be aware that just under the surface there are always sorrows, joys humming, and out in the wider world as well. So many beings troubled this morning or carrying secret joys. Let us open our hearts to all of them and feel our connection to one another. Blessed be. Sometimes a sorrow weighing on our hearts is the way that we have hurt others through our actions or inaction. We're human, we strive, we go astray from our own chosen path of how we want to be. And then we can also find joy in noticing these moments and with compassion for ourselves in gently leading ourselves back to how we want to be. So let us now, in silence, reflect on our week, our time since we've gathered together and had this moment of recommitment, and take this time to silently recommit ourselves to this path. In our striving, we have the help of companions on the path and shared principles to guide us. In your hymnal, if you turn back one page before the first hymn, you will find the principles that this congregation shares with 1,000 others. I think I put them in the online order of service, I hope. When I have introduced them, will you join me? And we'll say them in unison. We, as a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of the proposed 8th principle, adopted by almost a quarter of our congregations so far, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions.
Reflecting on our benediction brought to mind a fable by Leo Tolstoy called Three Questions. The premise of the story is that a king is looking for answers to these three questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I most need? And what affairs are the most important and need my first attention? The king goes to a wise hermit, but the hermit doesn't answer him directly, as most wise hermits do. Instead, the king notices the hermit struggling while digging his fields and helps him dig until nightfall. After nightfall, an injured man stumbles out of the forest, and the king bandages the injured man and saves his life. It turns out that the injured man is the king's would-be assassin, and by saving the injured man, the king has turned a mortal enemy into a lifelong friend. When the king asks the hermit the three questions one last time, the hermit answers, "You have already been answered." He explains that if the king had not helped him dig the fields, the assassin would have attacked him on his way home. Then, if he had not bandaged the assassin would have died, never forgiving him, and would not have become his friend. In each case, the choice to love one's neighbor as oneself was the one that brought about the fullest and the most abundant life. So, the hermit concludes a little lecture to the king. Remember then, there is only one time that is important, now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. The most necessary person is the one with whom you are, for no one knows whether they will have dealings with anyone else ever again. And the most important affair is to do them good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. I think that many, including myself, come to faith communities like UUCPA looking for the answers to these three questions. When I look at our benediction through this lens, it occurred to me that many of our parting words, are answers to these questions. For example, what is the most important time when we are out in the world? Who are the most important people? The suffering. What affairs are the most important to help the suffering? If you're familiar with our benediction, or if you turn to it in the back of your order of service, you'll notice that most of the lines follow this same pattern. Here, I think, is something we can take comfort in. As a community, we have come together for answers to the three questions, and like the king in Tolstoy's story, we can also be told, "You have already been answered." Whatever it is that's stopping us from being the people we know we ought to be in the world, I don't think it's the lack of knowledge about what's important. I'll close my reflection with a reading from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Micah, chapter 6. These are the words of challenge that the prophet Micah spoke to the people of ancient Israel. "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. You have already been answered. Let us reflect. Can we not say the same here? May we hear and take to heart the prophetic answers of those who have come before us and are among us now, and live out the answers to our own deepest questions.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayo, for being our guest conductor. Today's service, as Wei just says, is about our benediction. The word means literally good words, although it's often translated from that Latin word into the word blessing, which is an interesting question. Is it a blessing? I'll talk about that in a little bit. But first I want to give you a little bit of a history of how we got our benediction, which if you're a very diligent reader of our website or my occasional columns, you may already have heard. But I won't assume that of anybody here. Interestingly, it's been 10 years since we began ending our services with a benediction. I should say, we already had a benediction. We would say different words near the end of the service each week. But we didn't always say the same thing, and we didn't end with those words. It was always followed by the postlude. In some congregations, people leave the hall during the postlude, not here. We like to stay and listen to it. And we also like to applaud the musician for all the things that they've played during that service. So when the postlude was the very last thing, the service ended with applause. This didn't always feel appropriate to the theme or the mood of the service. And it also tended to create the feeling that we had been at a performance, which, a concert can certainly be a peak spiritual experience, but it was a very different feeling than the feeling that we otherwise might leave our service with. So I had visited other congregations where the very last words are a blessing or a benediction, and I really loved the way it felt for that to be the very last thing. It seemed right to have the postlude followed by its applause, and then an element that would help us to leave with a sense of participation, something we all do together in the service, a moment of mutual care, and a turning outward after this internally focused time. Psychologists will tell us that we have a particular bias, a cognitive bias towards both the beginning of things, first impressions really do have extra weight, and the most recent thing that has happened, recency bias, that is called. This is a really good thing to remember, either if you are interviewing for a job or you're interviewing someone else, say. That the first thing that they say as they enter the room, or you say, interviewee, as you enter the room, is likely to have an outsized impact, as is the very last thing. Now, if you're an interviewer, it's good to remember that and try to compensate for it by thinking extra hard about all the things that happened in between, which might be even more important. But we do have this bias. And so wise interviewees and wise leaders of services will give a particular thought to how do we want to end? That's what's going to stay with people. Dan Harper, our then Minister of Religious Education, as he and I were chatting about this, suggested having the same words each week, and I liked that. And although it filled me with trepidation to ask everyone to hold hands, which was something we didn't normally do, I knew I wanted for us to make a physical connection. Those of you who know Dan will not be surprised to hear that idea came from me, not from him. So, okay, we were going to say the same words every time, have a suggestion to hold hands. What words? The first thing my eye fell on was this passage from Walt Whitman that Weija shared during our centering words. It's from the preface to Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the volume of his poetry that he worked and revised, published in different versions all through his life. I'll probably give a sermon on that passage at some point. I mean, I have so many thoughts and questions just about that piece, argue not concerning God. But, that passage didn't really feel right as something to end with every time. It sounds like a command more than an invitation, albeit a command to do some terrific things, despise riches, hate tyrants, have patience and indulgence toward the people, dismiss anything that you learn that insults your own soul. Lovely, lovely thoughts. But it didn't seem quite right. Dan and I both had stories relating to the benediction said in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Concord, Mass., where he grew up and where I have visited. Actually, we really had the same story of going to the home of someone who belonged to the congregation, two different families, as it turned out, but we had both had this experience of going to somebody's home who belonged to the Concord congregation and seeing these words posted on or near their door, so that they had taken it so much to heart that they put it where they would see it not only when they left church, but when they left their home. And Dan echoed that when we got in the way of saying our benediction. He made copies to go in the doorways of all the classrooms so that the kids see them, anybody sees them when they leave those rooms. We both really liked the way they had become a blessing that people bestowed on themselves daily. So I knew these and liked them and wondered where they'd come from, so I poked around a little bit. So here, first you can listen to the Concord version, and you might notice some things that are similar and some things that are different. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. These are such ancient and familiar words that somebody, I'm forgetting which of you, remind me after the service, said, they said our benediction at Queen Elizabeth's funeral. They come largely from Paul's letter to the people of Thessalonica, but they've been changed over the years, including by the Concord Church. And then I found this from the Reverend Dr. Brent Smith's website. He used to be a minister at All Souls UU congregation in Tulsa. Don't know if it was or is still a blessing that they use. But it's very similar, has a couple different things, like adds the lines, love all men, love all women, love all children, love all souls, serving the Most High, and rejoicing in the power of the Spirit. Amen. Now, I'm guessing that both of those have their origins in the Presbyterian worship book, because I've found another version that online, not from a Unitarian Universalist church, that says it's adapted from the Presbyterian worship book and the Bible. Similar, but with the words, honor every person that you meet, and love and serve the Lord, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit. Well, so I looked at all of these, and I really liked the Concord version, but before adopting it for UUCPA, I wanted to think, is there anything really central to my theology or the practice of this congregation, the priorities of this congregation, that's not in there? Now, you may have some things as well. I'd be really interested to know. What isn't in our benediction that you would put there if it echoed the most important things to you? What I saw, looking at the Concord version, was there wasn't anything about love. Well, it was implicit. Lots about how we treat people. That presumably is because we're expressing love, but it wasn't said in so many words. Okay, so I wanted to add a line about that. And what else? Well, if love is the work and the reason for our lives, what sustains them, at least mine, and looking around how we conduct ourselves in this congregation, a lot of us, is beauty, cherishing it, noticing it, creating it, just making room for it to blossom in our awareness. So I wrote 2 more lines. Rejoice in beauty, speak love with word and deed. And there we had it. As I said, the scariest part was asking everybody to hold hands. And at first that was a challenge because we needed to hold the paper at the same time. We didn't have the screens yet, and we didn't know it by heart. And also because, as I said, we weren't too used to it. And then not everyone is comfortable holding hands. And even before COVID, it was important to be able to decline if one was sick or didn't want to get sick. Okay, remember, wash your hands frequently, especially after you hold hands with people. So I've gotten more and more explicit about saying, there's other ways to show that you're connected without holding hands, if that's what you prefer. In any case, it wasn't long before most people didn't need to see the words. Y'all memorized it long before I did. And people began reaching for the nearest hands and stretching to include those who were further away, just to symbolize, I'm there with you even though we can't actually reach. And that's become an important part of the ritual. We don't just remind ourselves of some of the things that we want to do as we go forth. We're practicing them right there and then. Let's do this right now. Remind ourselves of a life that's lived in love, courage, compassion. Now, much like the hermit in the story that we just shared finally said, this is really all stuff we already know. There are no grand pieces of wisdom we never thought about in this benediction. It's like we just want to leave with a reminder. Again, recency bias, right? What's the last thing that we want to hear before we make this transition from the service to the rest of our week? The rest of our week. It's like checking when we leave the house, Got my keys, phone, wallet. Okay, got courage, compassion, hope, love. All right, ready to go out into the world. This series, it's called Why We Do That in the Sunday Service, but it's really about why we have services at all and why we have a congregation at all. That question that the Mission Task Force has been posing to itself and to us. Why does UUCPA exist? What are we for? Why are we here instead of not here? And from the answer to that question follows the how and why we have Sunday services and everything else that we do together here. And from the answers to why do we have services follows why we end the services in a particular way. What is it that we need to take with us from this 1 hour into the other 167 or however many it is until we come back here? Something I've noticed, maybe you notice this too if you come week in, week out and say these words, is that different lines come into prominence at different times. Something that might have just seemed like rote to you and didn't catch your imagination for months or years, suddenly because of some shift in your own circumstances becomes the most important line that week. Like, if you're in a lot of conflict with somebody dear to you, suddenly return no one evil for evil becomes what you need to take with you. Or, if a friend is ill or somebody in your life is grieving, help the suffering. Of course, you're always for helping the suffering, but suddenly you really hear that, oh, that's what I need to be doing this week. I want to help the suffering. And if depression is looming over you, then maybe hold fast to what is good, is the line that really stays with you, calls out to you from our benediction. As Waja and I were talking it over, They said it seems kind of like a mission statement in some ways. It's not the mission of the congregation, which, as I said, is under review, and we're looking for the words that express what's important to us. And yet it does read a lot like a mission statement. And that sent me looking up mission statements. Here's a whole bunch I found. You can find pages and pages of them on the internet. Here's a whole bunch from various companies. Mostly it doesn't mention the name of them in the mission statement, but I started to notice something, and maybe you'll notice it too when I read you several in a row. Just as a hint, it's not so much noticing what's there as what's not there. I'll be curious to hear what you notice. Okay, mission statement. To inspire humanity both in the air and on the ground. This one is a rare one that says the name of the company right here. 3M is committed to actively contributing to sustainable development through environmental protection, social responsibility, and economic progress. To move the web forward and give web designers and developers the best tools and services in the world, to refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, to create value and make a difference, to improve its customers' financial lives so profoundly they couldn't imagine going back to the old way, to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time, to nourish people and the planet. We're a purpose-driven company that aims to set the standards of excellence for food retailers. Quality is a state of mind at, I could say blank, but why conceal the fact? Whole Foods Market. Here's what I noticed. These are all for-profit companies. Their mission, so I understand it, and so they report when they have to make big decisions, is to make money, make a profit for their owners, which is often shareholders. These are public companies, I think all of them, or for their main shareholders especially. That's hardly even in these. It's kind of hinted at in the one from Coke, the one that's mission is to refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, which I think means to give everybody a dose of caffeine. Okay. Coke says part of their mission is to create value. I think that's a euphemism for money, to earn money. Hey, that's what Coke is here for, okay? Not just to inspire optimism or go really well with Mexican food. Here's a rare one that makes it explicit. Shape the future of the internet by creating unprecedented value and opportunity for our customers, employees, investors, okay, our owners, and ecosystem partners. Okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of, right? This is the purpose of these companies. It's just weird that it's not there in the mission. You know? We know that for these companies, profit is the primary or a primary mission. We know because of the way that they operate. That they might change their mission or certainly change the way they operate depending on how the profits are going. We see it in the news in this area all the time, that if the last quarter or the last year, if you want to think really long term, is disappointing in terms of profit, then they might raise prices or more likely lay off a lot of people, sometimes shift how they carry out the mission. And not just if they've had a loss recently, they've operated at a loss. And not just if the profit isn't quite what they hoped, but if the profit isn't growing as fast as they hoped, they may lay off a huge portion of their workforce. So clearly, profit is a really big part of the mission. Everybody knows that, who works there, everybody who knows it, who buys the product or the service. There are alternative ways of doing business, if that's what you want. There's nonprofits, there's government agencies that do some of these things. There's dual bottom line companies like Ben & Jerry's says, we have a mission of earning money for our shareholders, our owners, and we have a social mission, and we want to hold those things in balance. We don't want one to operate at the cost of the other. But that's not what these companies whose mission statements I've just read off are doing. That's not how they operate. That's not their charter. So it's weird, this double nature of saying we're saying what the mission is. It's so important, and we're going to put it on the letterhead and paint it on the walls and put it on the website and everything, but we're going to leave out a key or the key part. Euphemisms are useful. I mean, I think of the example of, you're out to dinner, and somebody in your party gets up and says, "Excuse me." They go away for a little while and they come back. Or if they want to get really explicit, they say, "Gotta find the restroom." And I'm joking there, because restroom is a euphemism. I mean, we don't go there to rest, okay? Unless they're gone for a really long time and you gotta knock and make sure they're not taking a nap in there. No, we don't use a euphemism there because there's anything shameful about going off and doing what we do in the restroom. We just have this general sense that, the dining room and the restroom are things that are well separated. And so we just say, "Excuse me, gotta find the ladies," and off we go. That all makes sense in that context. But in the workplace, why separate the workplace from the workplace? Why not articulate the actual mission for which we're working? When you're spending 1/4 to 1/3 of your waking hours doing something, why conceal what it is? Well, anyway, the reason I digress about all of this is because I think that the general statement of mission out in our wider world and in so much of the lives of so many of us points up two really important things about our benediction, our services, our purpose as a congregation. One is we need a time, a place, a community in which we do get explicit about mission, in which we lay it all out there. And it's countercultural just to be explicit. In this place, this community, this whole culture in which there's this weird double message about what a mission is. It's swimming against a tide of hypocrisy just to say, hey, we have a mission, and we're going to keep checking it and checking ourselves against it and see how we're doing. And what is a successful year here at UUCPA is how well did we live up to our mission? I'm not saying we do this nearly as often as we should, but we should, right? And then and we say our mission every time we gather, so we can keep checking. And then a year where we didn't do that so well, we either say that wasn't such a successful year, or maybe we're telling ourselves something. Maybe our mission isn't what we say it is, and we need to revisit it. That has to get done now and then, like we're doing now. So that's number one. It's just really powerful to say, hey, this is a place where we're really going to live by our mission, and we're going to put it everywhere and say, nothing hidden. This is what we live by. And the second thing is, we need a time and a place and a community that focus their attention and our attention on our mission, the purpose of each of us, the why of our lives and the how of our lives. We need that. That's not necessarily our workplace. It's not necessarily any place else in our lives. And we really need it. Fred Bulow of blessed memory used to say he came here, and I can't remember exactly how he put it. I'm remembering something like he said he came for a tune-up of his moral compass, but that's kind of a mixed metaphor. He came here to remember where his life was headed, what direction he wanted to go. To be reminded. We have so many things demanding our attention, our time, our life energy that aren't aligned with our life's purpose. Sometimes they even undermine it. We need a reminder. So what about this thing, about this blessing? It really is still kind of a list of things to do, right? It's in the imperative mood. A blessing would be something like, blessed be, or may God's countenance shine upon you and give you peace. That's part of the priestly blessing of ancient Israel. Although if you know grammar, imperative and subjunctive mood are very similar. It's still saying, I hope something happens. But ours, it's less explicit than Whitman's, but it's of the same tone. It's the imperative mood. Do this, do that to us. Here, what we should each do. We could soften it. May we hold fast to what is good. May we help the suffering. But it's still, it's kind of on our shoulders. Here's what you are to do as you leave. I think there's something really interesting in Whitman that gives us something to think about our own benediction. That whole paragraph of his, that list of things that here is what you shall do, there's a reason, there's an end point. He says, when you do these things, then your very flesh will be a great poem. With our benediction, the and then, what will happen if we do these things, is unstated, the same way that the you is unstated in an imperative, like hold fast to what is good. What will happen if we do all these things? That's where the blessing comes in. We need a reminder of our purpose and our opportunities to enact our purpose, not just in the hour here and there in our spiritual community, the service, our small group that we go to, our choir practice, all those things, but in the days in between. And carrying that reminder with us, that in itself is the blessing. That's what makes our days a blessing to ourselves as well as to whomever we meet. When we take with us our deepest intentions, our reminder of what we all know already, when we take the time to reflect, our purpose, what's important to us, when we take that into ourselves and out into the other hours of our week. That is a blessing. Our very flesh becomes a great poem. So may it be. We create this space together out of wood and glass. Much talk about that right now as we embark on our capital campaign explorations. We create it out of electricity and binary signals. Most of all, we create it out of our presence. Wherever we are at this moment, we've chosen to be together, hoping that together we can do so much more to make our lives into all that we dream of, to align our lives with our purpose and make our world into the one that we hope to see. If we are moved by gratitude to each other, we may choose to support with whatever financial resources we can this community that we are creating and that is creating us. The offering will now be given and received. There are many ways. Brian is bringing up the box if you'd like to give through cash or check. The online order of service and the order of service that you've got in your hands, if you do, gives a QR code and link and also information on using text to give via Give Lively. Spirit, and we will sing Hine Matov, number 392 in the gray hymnal or online in your order of service. Translation is how good it is and how pleasant for people to dwell together. We will sing the Hebrew words that are transliterated there. Please stay after our benediction for the conversation time here or online. You know, I cannot be in both places at once, and I have really missed being able to chat with those attending online. So today, I will be joining the Zoom meeting in 5 minutes. We all begin wherever we are with greeting time, a chance to speak to someone you haven't met before or haven't seen in a while. So do start a conversation, especially old-timers, you know. See if you can greet somebody who looks new and find out something about them that will enable you to introduce them to someone else they should meet. Now, if you're online, please unmute yourself, turn on your video if it's not on already. You might touch hands virtually like this while we say our benediction together or extend a hand. And if you're in the main hall, you can cross your hands over your chest to say you're here, you're connecting in spirit, or take hands. Go out into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to what is good. Return evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Rejoice in beauty. Speak love with word and deed. Honor all beings. Amen. Blessed be.